Hey everybody, welcome
Welcome
into the
into the
Irish
Irish
NFL
NFL
show.
show.
We've got Brian. Good evening, gentlemen. Good evening. How are we all doing? Good?
Very well.
I was until I nearly lost me here. That hearing aid is going to have to get fast tracked after that.
Welcome in everyone watching the show. 10 p.m. in Ireland, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in LA, where we were three weekends ago, boys. Emergency show today. We've got a couple, hopefully at least one or two guests coming on. It's been a crazy day. First off, at 4:27 p.m., it was announced that Aaron Rodgers is staying in Green Bay. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. And then obviously around 6 or 7 o'clock our time, it was announced that the Seahawks had decided in principle to trade Russell Wilson to the Denver Broncos. So it's been a crazy day. We get everyone's thoughts in tonight. If you want to chat to us, folks, you can comment on YouTube. We'll put the link on Twitter in a second, or tweet us and we'll read them out as soon as possible. We're presented by Trust Gaming, and we're also presented by Mini Arcade Systems and the College Football Classic, Aer Lingus College Football Classic, this August in Dublin. More to come on all of the sponsors during the show. Colin, we'll start it off with you, man. How are you doing?
I'm fantastically well, Michael. Given I was not in any way, shape, or form expecting the Russell Wilson news. I had been convinced that with Pete Carroll back in Seattle, that a 70-year-old man was not going to want to rebuild. So I was surprised and delighted when that news broke this evening. In terms of Aaron Rodgers, I don't think it's particularly surprising. I think that one had been known for a little while, but I think the Wilson news is a big surprise around the league.
I was listening to Mike Florio yesterday's show whilst I was commuting, and he made it very clear that Russell Wilson is available and was available and has been available. And that was the reason why the Washington Commanders last week were doing their utmost to get him, because the Seahawks had made it very clear during the Combine week that he was available if the right deal was on the table. I think it's fair to say the right deal was certainly on the table from a Seattle point of view, in terms of the enormity of what was given away by the Broncos. And I think as the days unfold, I think it's very clear to what Colin was saying that Rodgers was never going anywhere. Because I read a piece today from a Broncos guy, I can't recall one of the beat writers, and he said, fantastic for the Broncos to be in on both deals to the very end. I don't think there was any deal for Rodgers, and as the days played out, you don't turn around the deal in which the Broncos have done today unless you're working on that for quite a period of time, maybe potentially over the past week. But a lot to get through. But maybe we need to go through the Rodgers contract first, because that's monumental in itself. Because I didn't see a 4-year deal coming. We all assumed it was a 2-year deal. And will he play 4 years? Probably not. But it's a significant deal in NFL history for a quarterback.
Yeah, and it's it's a big deal when we're going live in the off season, and that Aaron Rodgers deal is an absolute beezer. Obviously, these figures aren't confirmed. Pat McAfee is not happy with these figures, saying they're not true. 4 years, 183 million euros over 4 years, 141 million guaranteed. That would make him the highest paid player in NFL history. It was first reported by Ian Rappaport and Pat McAfee around the same time. And obviously, Rodgers, as a result, will play in London this year. And the Packers have now franchise tagged Davante Adams, and so that's going to happen. But Rodgers has since come out saying there is no official deal in place. I think he's had his thunder maybe put down a wee bit. But no, look, I mean, first off, for the Packers, obviously fans are delighted to get him back. I'm just hoping personally that, and I think a lot of fans will say that's the end of it now. And congratulations to Aaron for getting a big deal, and he certainly deserves it. And the pressure now will be on him to get a second ring, I'm sure, with the talent around him. And they've got a short window, Colin, because looking at for example, Davante Adams, how do they structure guys next year to keep him there if Rodgers is there? And what Brian said as well, can you see him playing 4 years?
Well, I think the NFL is not for long, and all you ever have is the 1-year window. You try and win it, and then you hope you can repeat. But we've seen how difficult it is to repeat, no matter how teams are set up. So I think they're looking at it in terms of bringing people in. It will be interesting to see the details of the contract. We've heard team friendly mentioned. We've seen and Rodgers himself say he signed nothing. But I think ultimately this came down to Aaron Rodgers missing the game against the Chiefs in some ways. I think realistically the Packers were always going to want to keep him, but Dylan Moran does a great piece in his first comedy special about potential and about how you should leave your potential alone because you'll only mess it up. And essentially, Jordan Love did that against the Chiefs. The Packers had a look into the future and they didn't like what they saw. And after that, they were going to give the King's ransom to Aaron Rodgers and they were going to bring back Devontae Adams. I think for the Packers, they're looking at it. The cap is supposed to go up astronomically over the course of the next few years. So I think they're going to look at it and say, it's money well invested, whatever way it plays out. And you're talking about a guy who's been MVP back to back. So, you'd imagine the drop off isn't going to be spectacular. We saw Tom Brady play into his 40s. So for Rodgers, could he? I mean, yeah, but he's had more injuries than Brady had. But I think for the Packers, they're just looking at it and saying if they are hoisting the Lombardi in February, they are going to see this as a job well done.
I'm surprised I'm actually saying those numbers aren't accurate because they're the numbers that have been reported for weeks on end. He was obviously going to be the first quarterback to essentially pull in $50 million a year, so it's not too far off the beat. And reckon Colin is spot on. They've forecasted an increase in the salary cap. It's gone up by 18.5 million, I think, based on last year, and it's expected to go up again next year. So they're obviously forecasting for that. For Jordan Love, I know Colin was saying he was, that game against the Chiefs, and I'm sure Packers fans tonight won't care about me talking about Jordan Love. The fact is now he's going to be readily available for some team to come in now, and I imagine by the draft he will have been traded. I mean, they're saying he's worth a second or a third, and someone will take a chance because I think teams will look past that game against the Chiefs and think how many rookies have you seen our second year quarterbacks before when they get their opportunity don't do anything in their first game? They'll probably see potential there to bring him in and give them the opportunity to challenge to be the quarterback for their team. The Adams one didn't come as a surprise. I think it was, in fact, today was obviously going to be the day. Really, we've been earmarking this day because the tag, and they needed to get both of them back in for next season. So it's a great day for Packers fans. They need to finally go and deliver and put themselves in that Super Bowl because how many years now? 2 years in a row they've been number one seed and looked like they were a slam dunk to go to the Super Bowl and hasn't materialized. So the pressure will be back on next year on Rodgers, especially now that he has the money in the bank.
There's a lot to obviously get through tonight with a guest coming in a few minutes. And if you want to get involved in the show, you can use the hashtag Irish NFL Show. If you're listening to us on our podcast, obviously after this time, folks, any reviews are greatly appreciated. Like I agree with what you're saying in terms of Aaron Rodgers there. I think it's going to be interesting to see now because he's got one less quarterback in the NFC to worry about, in the sense of Russell Wilson. And it's gonna be interesting to see what happens with Green Bay this season. I'm just delighted that we're going to get to see him play in London now. I think it's going to be a great game, regardless who they're playing. It's probably going to be an AFC team. Before we get Ian on, let's just look at the Russell Wilson trade details. I had to update this. I'm presuming this is correct. Colin can correct me maybe if it's wrong. 2 first rounders, I think, this year and next year. 2 second rounders, quarterback Drew Lock, Shelby Harris, and tight end Noah Fant. The Broncos obviously receive Russell Wilson on a 4th rounder. That deal is in principle and is reliant upon Russell Wilson agreeing to that trade, which, well, you're hoping Adam Schefter isn't reporting falsehoods. Colin, I think the conversation's interesting because Brian's made the. You were saying about the picks already, Brian, and the players. I personally, if you look at the players, I think Seattle's been shafted. I mean, like
that's more about the picks, to be honest. For me, players come and go. I think it's the enormity of what's being given up. Essentially, look, I let Colin go first. He's the Broncos fan. You're the Broncos fans. It's your opportunity to say it as you.
Plenty of time.
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the interesting things is the fact that they turned down more from the Commanders to take the Broncos offer, and I think ultimately this comes down to kind of Seattle kind of putting themselves in a hole. Um, with the trade, ultimately the Jets have possibly been the reason that the Broncos were able to acquire Russell Wilson. I think as long as Wilson plays for 3 years, then essentially, it's a good deal for the Broncos, because the Broncos have had all of the first round picks over the last 6 years, but have been unable or unwilling to find a quarterback. Does Russell Wilson make the Broncos immediate Super Bowl contenders? No, but does he make you fun to watch and much more competitive in what is now possibly the most stacked division in football? Yes. So for that reason alone, it's absolutely worth it for my money as a Broncos fan. We have been suffering over the last few years, and this immediately elevates you back into the conversation. George Payton had to do something in year 2, and he went out and he did it.
Look, if George Payton in 4 or 5 years' time will always be earmarked against this trade now, like essentially whatever happens throughout the next his time as GM, he's the man that made this trade. So he'll live and die by this trade, and if it comes to fruition, there's him getting back challenging for a Super Bowl, he'll be the best GM in years. It's boom or bust, as I say. I do think they'll be challenging within the division, whether they can get to a Super Bowl. Like, it's not just the division. The AFC is stacked. You've got Burrow, you've got Lamar Jackson. It's, when you compare it to the NFC, it's night and day. And from a Seattle perspective, I think they're going to go for Malik Willis in the draft. They would have looked at what he did at the combine. I know combines are combines, but he has similarities to Russell Wilson. He's a younger player, obviously. He's coming out of Liberty, but from what you saw last weekend, what you see the footage, there's traits there similar to Russell Wilson, and they're in at 9 now. I wonder will they try to even move up again? Potentially with the Giants at 7, because the Giants are going to look to pull out at 7 spot. So will they go quarterback? Like Drew Lock is not going to be the quarterback there. Let's be honest. We know that. He's not going to be a starter there in Seattle. I don't think Pete Carroll would have accepted that as part of the trade. He would have been. I think he'd be satisfied with what he's got in terms of return on players, and I think he'll be happy that he has an opportunity now within the top 10 to go and take a younger quarterback, and maybe that will re-energize him to, look for a rebuild. I know Colin didn't think for a long time that's why the deal wouldn't take place, because he wasn't interested in the rebuild. But maybe his hands are tied, but I certainly think that where they are now in the draft will allow them to certainly consider a quarterback.
Just a big hello to Laura and also to Fred in the comments, and everyone watching online as well, folks. Really appreciate it. Good to get a bit of chat in, especially a few weeks after the season's over. Some big news today and big news ahead next week of free agency. We'll be back on Sunday as well for St. Patrick's Day special. I'll give my thoughts on both maybe after our first guest, maybe our only guest. I don't know. This is the joys of going live unexpectedly. Delighted to welcome Ian Sinclair back to the show. Ian was on the show around, Colin, am I correct, in the draft, talking before the whole Aaron Rodgers madness started. Ian's from Mile High Report. We were fortunate to be in his podcast last week. Ian, how are you? You all right?
I'm still on a daze. I did not see this coming, because we touched on it on our podcast with Adam Malnati when you guys were on. We didn't even think Russell Wilson was a possibility. That was not something that we even contemplated, because we didn't think the Seattle Seahawks would make him available. What we didn't realize, and I've had this in my head, and I've told Adam this a couple of times, is the only way that it would happen is if he wanted out. That is Russell Wilson from Seattle. And since the news, I've just been in a daze. I sent out a tweet joking, the Will Ferrell character from Talladega Nights, Ricky Bobby, after he did his first race. I don't know what to do with my hands. I've been in that state for however long since it's been announced. I still can't believe it. The Broncos finally have a franchise quarterback. The last 6 years of this hell are over.
I have some breaking news for you guys. Jimmy
yes,
G
I
has
just
been,
seen the email. Go for it.
Jimmy G has been traded to the Washington Commanders.
No, he has not. Are you serious?
What a day! What a day! So we better hang on to we better hang on for another hour. Someone else will be traded within the next hour. Sorry, I didn't mean to crush you.
Has that actually just happened, like live in the last few seconds?
Yeah. It has,
Who's reported it?
Schefter.
Sorry, can I just jump in on what
Ian
Ian said? And yeah, we'll get on that. We'll come to that there. Ian, my chest has not been this sore in years. I was like gonna have a nice quiet evening, got a lot of work to do, and then boom, I was driving home from work. Rodgers stopped on the motorway, done a few tweets, and then boom, I've got 4 or 5 missed calls, and then sorry, I'm jumping on Brian's question here, but one thing that we sort of talked about a wee bit, and we haven't really been into too much, looking for a lot of people watching this, maybe not be Broncos fans, but fans of the NFL. This turns the AFC into a complete bloodbath, and the AFC West now, Ian, is something that, my God, you could literally put them in primetime games, both of these games, and usually, after Peyton Manning left the Broncos, or even before Mahomes was in Kansas City, those games were at the end of the season, but now they're really, high-end premium games.
Oh, absolutely. I think you're going to see Russell Wilson versus Patrick Mahomes on Sunday Night Football 2 times a season. You're going to see at least one of them against Justin Herbert on Sunday Night Football. And you mentioned the AFC. What's fascinating about this is I cover sports betting. I'm an analyst for PlayColorado.com. I run some other sites now for Katina Media, which is a part of gambling, sports betting, all that stuff. And I've been looking at the odds for the Broncos. And after the Aaron Rodgers news, the sports books in America adjusted their odds from around 2,000 plus 2,000 to plus 3,000. As it stands right now, the Broncos are at plus 1,200 to win the Super Bowl. That's better than the Cincinnati Bengals.
What were the Bengals? The Bengals were 50 to 1, I think, at the start of the season. Something along those lines last year.
Yep, and right now they're plus 2,000. So the only teams with better odds to win the Super Bowl right now at DraftKings Sportsbook in America are the Bills at plus 650, the Chiefs at plus 700, the Packers at plus 800, the Rams at plus 1,000, 49ers at plus 1,200, tied with the Broncos, which is just fascinating to me. That shows you the value of a quarterback, and I think Broncos fans know that. I think fans of the NFL know that. It's a quarterback-driven league, and we've seen the Broncos. We touched on this on our podcast. I asked both of you, are the Broncos a quarterback away? And my answer to that was, it depends on the quarterback. Well, with Russell Wilson, the Broncos are no longer a quarterback away.
Ian, I suppose I'm interested in kind of looking at that a little bit further, because obviously Wilson is a phenomenal QB, and we've talked about QB-driven league, but the Rams didn't just bring in Matthew Stafford. Alongside Matthew Stafford, they already had Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey, and they brought in Von Miller and Odell Beckham. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers did not just bring in 6-time Super Bowl champion Tom Brady. They also brought in his friend Rob Gronkowski. They brought in Leonard Fournette, playoff Lenny, and they drafted, in Tristan Wirfs, arguably the best right tackle in the league, and in Anton Winfield Jr., an absolute superstar in the secondary from day one. So I'm interested, in terms of looking at the Broncos, looking at maybe some of the other pieces, the lack of production on the edge last year, and maybe with Shelby Harris gone, the D line, and potentially the O line and around the right tackle. Do you think that the Broncos get, I know the odds change and people react to the news, but are the Broncos serious in terms of going deep in the playoffs and making that that Super Bowl push?
I think so. I think, because when you look at the trade and what George Paton sent to the Seahawks for Russell Wilson, they still have 4 picks in the top 100. So if they want to get back into the second round, or even at the bottom of the first round, to get that right tackle, if there's somebody there, George Paton has the capital to do that. So they can get that, finally, the right tackle that has been a problem since John Elway took over and Peyton Manning was here. And in terms of the edge, I think I would be shocked if Von Miller does not come back to the Denver Broncos at this point. There was a tweet from Andrew Mason, a friend of mine and a friend of yours. He sent a tweet of Von Miller's Instagram where he was with Russell Wilson. And of course, Von Miller sent that tweet on Monday about running it back at the 5280. So I think there's your edge. Peyton has the capital to get a right tackle. And the thing about Russell Wilson, and we've seen this with Peyton Manning, a great quarterback covers up a lot of issues on your offensive line. Now, obviously, they'd still need to get it figured out, especially at right tackle. And if that's through the draft, whether it's signing somebody, the thing that's getting lost in the sheer excitement of the Broncos trading for Russell Wilson is they're now attractive destination for free agents, but also for potential buyers. That's the magnitude of this, of bringing Russell Wilson to the Denver Broncos, because now players are going to want to play here and owners are going to want to buy the team. So I'm excited to see what George Payton does with free agency. They still have cap space to make moves in free agency. I mentioned it earlier. They still have the draft capital to get the players they need. It's an exciting time, finally, for Broncos fans.
Ian, I just said prior to you coming on that the enormity of this deal doesn't get done, in a quick time. This is something they would have been working on potentially over the past week at the combine, and the Rodgers situation was probably well known that he was always going back to Green Bay, and it was never really on the cards that the Broncos were in. I know people were speculating, but the enormity of this deal, this would have had to be in the offing for quite some time, I would have thought.
Absolutely. And it would have had to have gotten the approval of Russell Wilson because he has a no trade clause. So he would have had to have been in on these discussions. He would have had to have given the Seahawks the okay to make the trade. Obviously, he did. And then you have to work out the details of a trade. And I think it's been reported that this has been in the works for 2 weeks, whether it was Adam Schefter or Tom Pelissero. Pelissero with NFL Network was the first to get this out, I believe. So this has been in the works for a while. So you're right. This is not going to come together over the course of 5 hours because Russell Wilson has to give the okay. He obviously did. That then allows George Payton and the Seahawks to get the details figured out and how the money is going to work. It's not just the capital in terms of players and draft picks. It's also the salary cap implications and the money that either stays with the Seahawks and then comes over to the Broncos.
And I think I know when the deal started to be discussed. We were in Radio Row a few weeks back, and Russell Wilson happened to pass by us. And I think Colin just tipped him on the shoulder and had a word with him.
Well, we can thank Colin then, because Colin probably was wearing his Broncos getup, and he said, "We could use you in Denver, Russell."
Look at the Irish.
I think it was the neck brace that you had him in.
It was the pints of Guinness he was promised.
Yeah.
Just to confirm, because I've had a few, just to see people commented, Jimmy Garoppolo has not been officially traded to the Commanders yet. Would like to thank the fake Adam Schefter account for that. And Ian, we have you mortified now because for the last 6 minutes you thought that Jimmy Garoppolo was a Commander. I'm presuming that's the name. Yeah. Obviously, a show, Ian, where we got Packers fans, Broncos fans, all NFL fans watching this night. We're getting comments about Germany games, everything. Let's look at the guys that are going over. Drew Lock, Shelby Harris, Noah Fant. Now, Noah Fant especially still quite young in the league. Shelby Harris, very well respected in Denver. What are Seahawks fans who might be, understanding me? Lads, you know Michael Lavery tonight. He's absolutely heartbroken. What are Seahawks fans in Ireland, the UK, and Europe? What can they take solace from here? Because obviously, I don't know about Drew Lock in terms of longevity at quarterback, but two good guys are in different positions.
You're getting a great guy in Shelby Harris. You're getting a guy who will do it on the field and off the field. Noah Fant, I think it never really worked out here. And I'm not sure why, whether it was injury stuff. He did have flashes, but in terms of the quarterback, it's all going to depend upon what they decide to do, because do they draft Willis? Do they go a different route with that number 9 pick? Do they just bite the bullet and go with Geno Smith and or Drew Lock and then see what happens in 2023? I'm not sure what the Seahawks do from what they do or where they go from here, because I never thought this was a possibility. And I always compared it to John Elway and Dan Reeves in the early 90s, where there was talk of potentially the Broncos moving on from John Elway. That's the magnitude of this move. Russell Wilson is in that conversation as a franchise quarterback. Broncos fans need no reminder. They don't just grow on trees, no matter how often John Elway or whoever is shaking the trees to find franchise quarterbacks. They just don't fall out. So where the Seahawks go from here is going to be determined on what they decide to do at the position and when they decide to do it. I'm not sure I can give them solace other than you're getting a great guy in Shelby Harris and you're getting a young tight end who has a lot of upside.
I think there's a clear disconnect between the Seahawks marketing department and how the fans feel this evening, because that Wilson tweet that went out from the film Castaway has upset a lot of people.
And I think they've thus deleted the tweet. I think they were bullied into deleting it.
I think that's a shame, because ultimately he's gone. What are you going to do about it? I do see Mina Kimes and the Cardinals Twitter account have had some good banter certainly this evening. But Ian, I suppose, as Michael said, we have fans from all 32 teams watching, and one of the, obviously with the Broncos out, but one of the things I suppose all Broncos fans would have been looking at the draft and potentially who might go. And Brian was saying that he thinks, Willis might be the guy the Seahawks go after. But for looking around at, maybe some of the other teams looking at QBs, in terms of the guys you think might go towards the top, who are you looking at QBs that you think, is it Pickett? Is it Carl? Who are your guys in the upcoming draft?
I think it starts with Willis. I think he has the most upside. I think he flashed the times that we saw at the combine, and I get it. Some call it the underwear Olympics, but he still flashed. He still had his moments. And I think that's what you're getting with Willis, is you're getting the most upside from a young quarterback. He has the ability to make plays with his legs. We saw it with his arm. It's just a matter of coaching. And I think the comparison to Russell Wilson is apt. I'm not sure if, obviously I'm not comparing the quarterbacks, but I'm comparing the style of play. And I think that would seem like a natural, seamless transition for Pete Carroll and the Seahawks to go from Wilson to Willis. So we'll see. The other ones, there's not the same upside. So I don't know if teams are going to take the risk. Obviously, when it comes to quarterback, you have to shoot, and hopefully you make your shot. The Broncos haven't been able to do that, and I'm just glad they don't have to worry about it now. I get it. This is an NFL show, but I cannot tell you how excited that I am that I never have to. I don't want to say never, but I don't have to talk about this as a Broncos fan again. So I'm sorry for Seahawks fans. I'm sorry for Commanders fans. Apparently the Commanders put forth a huge offer, but Wilson didn't want to go to the Commanders. I don't know why that would be. I guess he looked at the franchise the last 3 decades, but it's not the best draft to look at a quarterback. So I think it's going to be Willis, and then we'll see what happens with the rest of them after that.
Ian, yeah, you're right there. Obviously, apparently there's rumors going around that the Commanders rang Kansas City last week as well and asked about the availability of Patrick Mahomes. And I would have loved
kudos
to
for
be
asking.
They've rang every team in the league according to the reports over the past few days.
I think the only thing you have to offer the Chiefs is just like a lifetime supply to a buffet for Andy Reid. Maybe that might at least whet the appetite a little bit.
Last one for me, Ian, right? And it's sort of a double question. First off, do you think the trade represents good value in the sense that you're looking at draft picks for 2 years and not 3 years that many outlets reported that Aaron Rodgers would have commanded from the Packers? Because you could look at it as a 2-year project when you have the offense and the defensive players there. And then also Broncos Rams open up a season, do you think, if Von Miller goes back?
I think that would be a fun way to start the season, especially since Wilson has played the Rams for the entirety of his career as a division rival. So I could see that happening. In terms of the capital and the trade, I think George Paton nailed this because he didn't have to give up any of his young pieces. He didn't have to send a Jerry Jeudy or a Pat Surtain or a Javonte Williams or a Cortland Sutton or a Tim Patrick. And he still has the cap space. I think that's the one thing that when you look at the Rodgers, Wilson, what are you getting? What are the Broncos gaining? They would have lost a lot of cap space. And even after this trade, the Broncos still have close to $17 million in cap space. So that allows them to go out and get those pieces that Colin mentioned earlier that they need to address and they need to fill to help round out the entirety of this roster. And I do think, like I said earlier, I'd be surprised if Von Miller is not back. And then they only, to get two first-round picks, the Broncos still have a second-round pick, which they got from the trade with the Rams for Von Miller. They still have a third-round pick. They still have a fourth-round pick. So they have the ability to move back up if there's a guy that George Paton, Nathaniel Hackett, the Broncos like, they can move up and get. So I not only do you get your franchise quarterback, you have cap space still, and now you're an attractive team for free agents to come and play for.
Ian, I think you've done a really lovely kind of summation, and you've encapsulated the hope and the excitement that exists in Broncos country this evening. It's great to see smiles on faces. We want to thank you for taking the time to join us. For any of our viewers or listeners, you can find Ian over on Twitter at Ian St. Clair. He also writes, as he mentioned, for Play Colorado and for Mile High Report. It's a great podcast there with Adam. So, Ian, we thank you. Hopefully, we'll be welcoming you back to the Irish NFL show again in the not too distant future. But go and enjoy your afternoon in Denver, sipping on the sweetness of Russell Wilson and the Broncos having a franchise quarterback.
Thanks, guys. It's always a pleasure to join you. It was great crack, and it's a fleeting sensation. The last 6 years have been less than hopeful for the Broncos, and it's finally come back. So thank you, guys. Always enjoy it and looking forward to it.
Absolutely, Ian. Thanks, man, for your support. Chat to you soon, man. All the best. Thank you, Ian. Great to hear from Ian, and you can get Ian at Ian Sinclair and at Mile High Report and at Colorado Play. I think it is on Twitter. If I got it wrong, Ian, I'm sorry. Great to have Ian on, and at such short notice as well. I really want to give my thoughts on these trades, but maybe we'll keep that for the end of the show and have an argument like Ant and Dak and Saturday Night Takeaway or something like at the end of the show. Brian, there's a few other things today.
Yeah.
Mike Williams for the Chargers got a 3-year, $60 million contract. The Chargers are putting the bag in, but they're happy enough.
Yeah, when he was a standout wide receiver for them last year, I know that he went through kind of a lull between week 8 and week 12, but he came back to form towards the end of the season. We saw what he could do in the playoffs. The game leading into the playoffs, which wasn't to be for them, and the previous week against the Broncos, like he's really kind of come on. And look, he wasn't getting from the Chargers. I think there was never a case of him. I think his agent made it very clear in the past week, if you're not going to pay him, he's going to look elsewhere, and he would have got the money. So for the Chargers, in light of what's happened today and the division itself being so competitive, the Raiders got to the playoffs last year, they needed to keep him. So it's a good deal. And like, there's a few deals today, and there's a bit more information on Deshaun Watson's court case coming up this Friday, and we might get a resolution a lot quicker than we thought. So there's other stuff going on in the background, and we haven't even touched on Calvin Ridley. I'd love to have a conversation on his antics as well. But look, today is the day for Russell and Rodgers more so than
I'm happy to talk about it. I've got 45 minutes or so free here now. Yeah, Colin, I was actually going to come to Colin next, but let's just try and switch topics. Deshaun Watson Friday. There's teams crying out for a quarterback. Not crying out for it, but trying to get that franchise quarterback. Do you want to look into the future? Is there any NFC East teams, for example, or NFC West teams looking at Deshaun Watson now going, Saturday morning could become a...
Well, he comes with an asterisk, which is, the reality, no matter what happens on Friday. I personally would say that the Washington Commanders would be the team I would think would make the most sense, because Dan Snyder, I don't think, is going to have an issue with that asterisk. And so to me, that would have been one to potentially keep an eye on. We have to see how it plays out, and what, if any, punishment the league might decide to dole out, because remember, the league haven't acted in any way, shape, or form on things, and we've seen the league act in the past on allegations. So if there were to be more than allegations after Friday, we'll just have to wait and see. But obviously the bans that the league has issued in the past have been nothing in comparison to what Calvin Ridley, to lose an entirety of a season is quite something.
Yeah, Brian, Calvin Ridley banned for at least the 2022 season for found guilty on betting on sports. There was multiple social media comments about this. Some analysts saying, why didn't he just get his cousins to do it like the rest of the league? And I was like, oh, okay. But then also, whenever Calvin Ridley started tweeting, Brian, that for me was just the it's March, it's silly season territory.
When you're explaining, you're losing, as they say. Look, this all kind of rolls into what I was going to say about the Calvin Ridley, because I do agree with Colin. I think, look, we've been hoodwinked, but I've had 4 people text me saying Garoppolo's gone to Washington, so they've hoodwinked me, and they've been hoodwinked themselves. Look, it's obvious that Washington are in for a quarterback no matter who they get, and I think I would agree with Colin. The owner is not going to be concerned about whatever allegations are going on in the background, and it was very evident from our interview at the Super Bowl with Coach Rivera that he is keen to get a new quarterback. It's evident by the last week. I think inevitably I think that's where he will find his home. I think he'll end up with the Commanders, and yeah, he might get some kind of suspension from the league, but the inconsistency of the league is for certain, let's just say, off the field issues, you might only be banned for 6 games. I think Washington would look at the long-term view in terms of if he was to be banned for 6 games, they would still have him for the proportion of the season and leading into the future. But for Calvin Ridley, who spends $1,500 over the course of 5 days, which essentially meant he bet on Thursday Night Football, the course of a number of games on Sunday afternoon, and probably leading into Monday Night Football, and he's been removed from the league for a year, where he wasn't involved in any of those games or with the Falcons. So whilst I totally understand the league don't want players getting involved in that because it takes away from the game itself and how if common practice of the game, when you're literally signing contracts with every betting option that's available from Vegas or come other parts of the States week in, week out, and you have teams continuously promoting betting, and you're watching Red Zone on a Sunday and they're continuously talking about FanDuel and getting you to bet on the game coming up on Sunday Night Football. I think it's a bit hypocritical of the league to go and give them a year ban. I certainly think they could have looked at reducing that ban or certainly just implemented something. But again, there's no stipulations. Roger Goodell seems to make up the rules for every situation as he goes along, no matter what the instance, which is annoying in a way. For the Falcons, they're going to save $12 million on the cap this year, which they badly need, because Matt Ryan has taken up $48 million, which we discussed last week. So
the biggest in history. The situation, obviously, Calvin Ridley is receiving support for mental health issues, and we wish him the best.
I'm not condoning what he's doing. I'm just saying the troubling part for this is there's no consistency across the league.
Yeah, I agree completely. A couple of other ones, because I don't want to miss out certain teams. This is great because we're getting around a few things here before I give my mic drop take. Colin, Titans didn't tag Harold Landry, and Cam Robinson with the Jags has been tagged again. I mean, is the man in jail in Jacksonville, or what's going on, or what's the crack?
Well, look, I suppose the hope in Jacksonville is they've got in a head coach who's won a Super Bowl. So, they might be going in the right direction. And I think it'll be an interesting one to see what the Jags might do this offseason in terms of who they bring in free agency, because they really need to give Trevor Lawrence a couple more weapons, a bit more protection. I think certainly a tight end needs to be a top option for the Jags. And in terms of the Titans, the Landry one is it's an interesting one, and I saw some discussion amongst Titans fans and media earlier, and they were saying that if you look at maybe, and it's how you weigh this up and how teams kind of look at stats and analytics, and there'll be different approaches. So ultimately the number of sacks were really good, but if you dig a little deeper in terms of the number of pressures that he got, they weren't that good. And so the feeling was that perhaps the Titans felt that it was, and he overproduced and he wasn't capable of doing that again, and therefore that's why they weren't going to do it. But certainly you'd say that, like, he was impressive in what he did last year. And if you were to take somebody like Trey Hendrickson, right? We talked about him last year in the way in which he had a career year for the Saints. And sometimes that can mean in terms of, players get the money and do they rest on their laurels a little bit? Well, certainly that wasn't the case. Trey Hendrickson went and had himself a career year on top of a career year. Sometimes this can be, the players say if they haven't been tagged, they really want to go out and prove themselves. So I imagine there will be a robust market there for him. But it is one of those ones where sometimes you can be a bit surprised, right? There've been times where we've thought there'd be big markets for certain players, and all of a sudden, you go through the first wave of free agency, the second wave, and they're still there. But to me, I imagine there should be a market there for him.
Colin was talking potentially about tight end being picked up by the Jags. Some interesting stuff today I was picking up on regarding tight ends. Gesicki was franchise tagged by the Dolphins, and David Njoku was tagged yesterday by the Browns, and Evan Ingram, who won't be back with the Giants, thankfully, who's been very inconsistent for a player who was, they spoke about him being the next Kelsey when he was drafted. He simply tweeted tonight with a smiley face, nothing else, because he knows now he is at the top of the market for tight ends come next week, and he will be well looked after and financially secure, I'd imagine, come this day next week.
Christian McCaffrey, boys,
Yes.
the Panthers listening to trade offers for Christian McCaffrey, and there's a lot to happen over the next weekend. It's going to be a very interesting weekend. I know we're talking about like news comes out Monday, Tuesday. I think we're going to get stuff Saturday, Sunday. Personally,
I think it's going to be chaos. It's going to be chaos the next 10 days.
How many games, Brian, has Christian McCaffrey missed over the last 2 years? He's missed more games than your man McShane was thrown over the last 2 years. I mean, the man's missed 20 odd games in 2 years.
I can totally understand. Yeah, I get it. It's the same with Saquon. Like in terms of why you would consider trading. I guess for the Panthers, it's about the value. They want a first-round pick in return. I think teams are holding back because they feel they can get him for a second, and maybe come draft time they'll pull the plug and someone will give it one. But you're taking a chance because he just can't stay fit.
AOB, before I give my rant or take, anything else in the league I can think about? Obviously, Henry Hodgson was on Jeff Reinbold's show tonight, basically saying that the teams in London do not have to play the 9th game of a different schedule. And he did state on his podcast that teams that are in the international marketing for a certain country can prioritize themselves not just to play home games, but they can try and prioritize themselves to play away games as well. So you can read into that as much as you think. The Jets are a marketing team in the UK. I personally think the Packers might play the Jets. Now, if I didn't say that correctly, Henry, I'm sorry. But a very good interview with Henry and Jeff. And the American Football Ireland League starts the Premier Division, Division 1, Division 2 this weekend. Go out and have a look at the games, 1 o'clock Sunday. There's loads of games, American Football Ireland.ie, I think. Just Google American Football Ireland. All the games are there. Any of you boys going to any games this weekend?
Not this weekend, no.
I might go up to the Craigavon game, so hopefully I'm going to try.
There's a game in UCD, is it? In Trinity College, I think, this weekend. I think that's what the guys were contacting us about.
Yes, sir. Colin, are you going to go to any games?
I'm gonna try and see. I'm definitely enjoy. I've been to a load of the games. Obviously when I was working in Trinity and UCD used to go along, and always good crack. But I will admit, like I will be probably checking the weather before venturing along. I'm a bit of a fair weather fan when it comes to live, but wish everyone the best of luck. I saw that Liam Ryan, who is now the OC down in Limerick, and he's looking forward to their season. So I would say to people, if you do get the opportunity to go along, it is worthwhile, and it is good fun. And the people involved in the sport around the league, we've met a lot of them. A lot of them were at Jeff's coaching clinic, and really good people.
Yeah.
So it's great after the last 2 years where it has been so stop-start and they've only been able to do bits and pieces, that it is back.
Michael, you said about this, going back to the NFL situation, you're saying about the next week in particular being really busy before free agency even gets going. I mean, you're going to have teams who have to make difficult decisions with players over the next week, cutting players like Kyle Van Noy, who's been a really good player for the Patriots the first time, and then obviously he's come back from the move to the Dolphins. He got released yesterday. Like, he's a good player for any team to pick up, but you're going to see really significant players who, just because of cap reasons, can't be kept on. So I'd imagine over the next week there'll be a lot to get our head around in terms of players becoming free agents, not off the back of last season, but more so because they're being cut in advance of free agency start.
It's that key few weeks before the draft. And yeah, just to go back very quickly, and I completely agree with what you're saying, UCD Belfast Knights on Sunday, Craigavon Cowboys against the West Dublin Rhinos. Trinity's playing the Donegal Derry Vipers. So shout out to all those boys. UL Vikings, Wexford Eagles. And if I've got this game wrong, because I think the Jets might have been promoted, apparently the NI Razorbacks are playing the Antrim Jets. If I don't get the Craigavon, I might get the Antrim. I don't know, boys. We'll see the crack. Might have to head down your boys next to the woods if they take away the fuel tax tomorrow. We'll see the crack. Maybe I might come down for the crack. I just want to talk about Rodgers here, right? Well, not Rodgers, but I want to talk about Wilson. Today's been mad, and I haven't really had a chance personally to process it. I was going to come on here laughing and stuff. It's going to be obviously professionally, separately from the show. It's going to be great crack to watch, a great division. Brad, I genuinely think I think this is a good deal. I think, like, I look at Shelby Harris, and I think he's done such good things in Denver, and like Drew Lock. Lads, honestly, I don't see what the benefit here is for Seattle. Maybe in the short term with some picks. If you look at some of the draft picks this year, especially on the defense side of the ball, okay, but like, this is the 2-year gap for this team. Like, I've sat through Paxton Lynch, Trevor Siemian, Drew Lock. Who else, Colin? Go on.
Keenum,
I can't even. Flacco, forgot about that. Case Keenum. Who else? The other guy began with B. I've literally forgot his name. What do you call him?
Brock Osweiler.
Brock Osweiler. So I'm
Bridgewater.
Teddy Bridgewater as well. Believe me, as somebody that's paid thousands to want to go over and see some of these lads, I'm happy enough because the talent's there. I do think it sets, and this is going on a general basis, I think it sets an interesting precedent for the rest of, maybe not this year, but for next year. There was talk from multiple outlets saying that Rodgers would command 3 first-rounders at a minimum. The Broncos got him for 2 firsts and 2 seconds. It's a 2-year thing. I'm happy to throw the dice because if you're in a division and you got Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Derek Carr, and you're having to play them lads twice a year, never mind the rest of the actual team, I think they have to get someone like Deshaun Watson. It's about damn time that there's another team trying to get Kansas City down because, as we said before, Kansas City have got $35 million contract with Patrick this year. I'm sure it'll be restructured like every other good team does, but you're right in what you're saying, boys. At the start, this AFC is anyone's guess. Next year, I think it's going to be a hell of a year. Titans, Bills, Chiefs.
Whet's the appetite already for a season that's so far away? No, I agree. It's just like the deal makes sense. Totally makes sense. I was just saying, like, it's like any deal. I'm not just saying because of the Broncos. Any GM will always be now based on that. In 4 to 5 years' time, it works out. He was a legend. He did he brought back the good times. He brought back the challenging Broncos team that you want to see. If it doesn't go well and they don't get themselves to the playoffs in 2 or 3 years when they've no players coming in from draft, people will say it differently. Again, right now it's the right deal. It was always going to be the right deal.
I'll take it.
Oh,
I'll take it and run. But Packers fans lighted as well. And there was a lot of Packers fans over the last week, Colin, that were messaging us, tweeting us, saying they've never got to Lambeau. or even like I've seen the Packers in Baltimore, for example, they're buzzing about this game and they are going to get a ticket and a half if they can get a ticket to this game. I mean, this is going to be a ticket. Like this is going to be worse than trying to get oxygen tickets back in like 2006. You're not going to get one for this.
This is Garth Brooks in Croke Park type territory. I imagine NFL UK are delighted. I don't think it was we talked about it, a surprise. I think what is interesting though is Andrew Brandt, who was essentially the GM for the Packers. He had been kind of thinking in recent times. I think it was, and in fairness to Andrew Brandt, kudos to him, right? As a now media guy, his willingness to put his hand up and admitted he got it wrong. You'd love to see everyone kind of do that. But he had said, like, if you've been married for 17 years and your wife, or her spouse or husband is taking 2.5 months to make a decision as to whether they want to continue the marriage, is that a bad sign? Well, no, apparently not. It all went Aaron Rodgers' way. It'll be interesting to see what the Packers might look to do as well. But this is, talk about it. It's already a stacked team, right? And to have that stacked a team coming to London, it will be phenomenal. So it won't matter who they're playing, because Packers fans will travel in huge numbers. We know that. We know the numbers of dedicated and hardcore Packers fans there are here in Ireland and across in the UK. So we know that there'll be a huge turnout. I'm happy for them because, I suppose as a fan of a sport, right, it's good to see a guy be a one-team guy, if it is to be that way, because he is such a legend and he's so synonymous with the Packers. So I'm pleased for them that he is going to finish his career there, and that they will get the opportunity to see him on this side of the Atlantic before he rides off into the sunset. Can he get another Super Bowl ring before he does that?
I've seen Rodgers twice, and I've seen him get beaten twice, so I'll be going for the hat-trick this year.
To keep the neutrality, have we anything else to talk about?
No, I
asked a question. How much is 1,000 litres of oil in the South, boys? How much are we looking at?
I haven't scrutinised that, but there is a report this evening that our price of petrol is being reduced by 20 cents a litre.
You think the Broncos have spent big on Russell Wilson, boys? Buying out at the minute is a bit of a disaster. So hope Godspeed everyone watching this show. Here, shout out to Keith, to Stephen, to Laura, the Fred, to Elusive Poet, to everyone. I think Chris as well. Everyone commenting on Twitter tonight. To Neil Blair in Dublin saying that the Broncos are still the third best in the West. Thank you, Neil. I know you love the Chiefs. Steve Collins saying great to see Ian on with us. Ron, Jeffrey Reinbold has just texted me saying good show, boys. I told Jeff about the Russell Wilson news on FaceTime, and this was his face. You can imagine what he said. Are you me? So that was live earlier on. But yeah, boys, mad day. We're back on Sunday.
We're back on Sunday. There's an interesting comment I think from Keith around Gesicki and whether he will fight to be tagged as a wide receiver. So that could be an interesting one. If Gesicki gets tagged and fights and gets that, does that mean that Deebo Samuel is a running back? Because I don't think Deebo's going to like that.
I think there's a difference of around 10 million if he gets tagged as a wide receiver.
Yes.
I think Gronk to the Bills is, that is a strong possibility. I don't think.
Do you imagine that happens? Also, to get the Bucks in here as well, Chris Godwin, who, boys, nobody ever told me he played in Dublin a few years ago. Didn't have a great game in Dublin a few years ago. He was tagged tonight by the Bucks as well. We've got around it nearly a third of the teams here tonight. Anything else with any other team before anybody else gets
what I would say in the Goblin was where he tagged him last year with no sign of a deal. It looks like the deal is kind of, very close. And I think he doesn't want to play on the tag again, but I think that both parties are coming to the table, and I'd imagine the deal will be done very quickly.
The one thing we haven't had a chance to do because we haven't seen Mark since that, boys, I think Mark's still in LA. I don't know where he is or what
he's not far off LA. He's in Palm Springs at the moment.
Tell me this to end the show, right? And we can use this for some audio jingle at some point this season. What's more likely, lads? Tom Brady coming back or Stephen Cluxton coming back? Brian, I'll start with you as the dub in the house.
Tom Brady will play next season. Convinced.
No, he won't.
And I actually,
No, he won't.
I never thought I'd say this. I hope he comes back. I really do.
Really?
Because, yeah, I do. Yeah. And I'll tell you one thing, he certainly won't be going to an AFC team, that's for sure. He'll stick with the NFC. No, I genuinely do think he's going to come back. He was on another podcast last week. Oh, God, I can't recall the name of it. Someone very unusual, which I was surprised to hear he was on. But he said, he's glad to be back living in his number one household, as in the proper home. But come June, he might see things a little bit differently. And he said that on the podcast last week.
Colin?
But where?
Yeah, like the Brady, he seems to be making hints, but look, who knows in terms of what might happen. I will say, just in terms of other things, could the Seahawks, if they're going full rebuild, depending on if they could they let go of others? I know that might be painful for Lockett, DK, and the other one who is a free agent is Rashad Penny, who had really came into his own last year, a guy who suffered a lot with injuries. You know, the Bills need a running back. Could he go there? We know what Mike McDaniel can do with running backs. The Dolphins need running backs. Could he go there? Or, could he go to just down the coast to the 49ers? There's going to be so much that happens. It started today. Every year it starts, and in fairness, Brian has called this out in the past. It gets earlier and earlier, right? So usually you're talking about, like, it used to be like the first day. Then it started before that. Now here we are a week early, and I think, yes, you're going to see more and more, because there's plenty of QB dominoes to fall, and every owner, the Colts are the other one. Like, what's going to happen with Wentz? So there is so much to happen between now and the start of the official tampering period. So keep an eye on it.
Yes, back Sunday night, 7 p.m. for a St. Patrick's Day special. St. Patrick's Day is not until Thursday, but it's the first Paddy's Day in 2 years we're all going to have outside. So no, we aren't going live, but it's going to be a good crack. Some great guests coming up, and we'll announce it on Saturday. Who knows what will happen between now and then? But lads, thanks for coming on at such short notice. Thanks to everyone that's commenting there. Neil Logan saying Brady could be the backup to Wilson. Stephen Me saying Brady the Titans. Kevin McManus, Brady the Boyhood Club 49ers. And Keith is asking for a mock draft show of Irish fans. Let's try and do it. Let's see the crack. Stephen saying don't tell Trey Lance. Let's see the crack, boys. Tell you what, though, just to end the show, think of where the Seahawks team was a few years ago, and that defense and that offense, and Pete Carroll. This is the end of an era for Seattle. What a day. See you on Sunday, yeah?
See you then. Take care.
Good luck.
Ihoa.